Okay, I'm Matthew,
I'm Chandler.
and today we're going to be previewing the ACC. We're going to start with the Atlantic.
Okay, so the first team we're going to talk about today is the Clemson Tigers, your reigning national champions. And the first thing we're going to talk about is how they finished last year. So as everyone probably knows, they went 15-0. Best team, probably going to run through the ACC again, but we'll see what happens. So their production, they have 53 productions coming back, so they have decent amount of key players coming back, and they've also lost a few players. Offensive-wise, they have, of course, their star quarterback that everyone wants, Trevor Lawrence. He's their main player, main threat on offense. And then wide receivers-wise, they're pretty good with wide receivers, too. They got T. Higgins, who had a great year last year. And then they also have Justin Ross, who's returning, too. And then running back, they got Travis Etienne, and he's supposed to go off again. He's a junior this year, and he went off last year, sophomore year. Most likely will declare for the draft after this year, but he's a very good, talented player. Defensive-wise, they're still pretty good in defense also. They did lose, of course, quite a bit on defense, especially defensive line. And they have a few returners coming back. Isaiah Simmons, which is the linebacker. And then they also have Tanner Moose, which is a strong safety. And, well, key players lost. Like I said, defensive-wise, they lost Wilkins, Farrell, Bryant, Dexter Lawrence, all amazing players. Reason why they were able to hold Alabama to 16 points in the college football playoff. And recruiting-wise, they've done well recruiting for the last 5 years or so. They've done number 11 overall. In the last couple of years, they've actually finished in the top 10 of recruiting. So they continue to get great players at Clemson. And last season, their offense ranked number 2 in the country with 44.3 points per game. Defensive-wise, they're very good on defense also, number 9 in the country, and they only gave up 13.7 points a game. Schedule-wise, Clemson, they have the main game is actually Texas A&M, which they actually won last year 28-16 on the road. This year the game will be at Clemson, so that will probably be the hardest game. I'm assuming, well, I'm going to say Clemson's going to win that game, but I think it'll be a one-possession game the entire way. And then their main game, conference-wise, will actually be the following week at the Carrier Dome, where they'll play our Syracuse team, which is a very talented team and has given Clemson plenty of fits the last couple of years. They actually beat Syracuse a couple of years ago, and then honestly, they should have won the game last year too. So I'm saying overall they'll go 12-0, with possibility. The only scuff up, in my opinion, will be that Syracuse game.
I have them 12-0 too. They're pretty much in the same position Alabama is. They reload every year, especially now. Right now, they actually have for next year the number 1 recruiting class with the top 3 recruits coming in and the 4th on the way, maybe in Justin Flo. And they're at the same position where they can just reload, and their schedule's pretty easy. It's kind of like Alabama. You have 3 to 4 games every year you have to prepare for, but after that, you can just walk in and just talent-wise, you can just destroy the team you're playing.
Okay, so going off that, we're actually going to move on to our next team, which is NC State, which had a very nice year last year. They went 9-4, which included a bowl victory also. Unfortunately for NC State, they are losing quite a bit of players. They've lost actually 13 players the last 2 years to the NFL draft, and very good players on both the offensive side and the defensive side. Key returners this year is actually Matthew McCoy, which is actually going to be his first year as a starting quarterback. He's a sophomore. And then they also have some decent wide receivers coming back. They have Thayer Thomas, and the other wide receiver is Emeka Nze. I believe that. I might be wrong with that.
He didn't name him, so it's not his job to pronounce it.
Well, yeah, of course not. And he's a junior this year, so that's mainly their offense. And then defensive-wise, their returning defensive players are James Smith-Williams. He's a senior. He's a defensive end. He's supposed to be one of their strongest players on the defensive side. And then they have Alan McNeil, which is a sophomore tackle. He's supposed to be a very good player also. And then safety-wise, they're actually very strong in safety. They have a couple returning seniors. They got Jarris Moorhead, which is a strong safety, and then Stephen Griffin, which is weak side safety. Recruiting, NC State's actually been a very good recruiting team the last 5 years or so. They're number 42 overall. And they continue to recruit well because they've had a decent season. They haven't had that season that's got them over the hump in the ACC, but they've done well. Offensive-wise, last year they had the 23rd best offense in the NCAA with 33.8 points per game. Defensive-wise, they had a decent defense, 54 overall with a 22.2 points per game. And this season, schedule-wise, they don't really have many non-conference powerhouses. I mean, West Virginia's a decent team, but West Virginia's lost a lot of players, so that'll be an interesting game. That game's actually at West Virginia. And then I think the biggest conference game will be Syracuse, and that'll basically determine if NC State, basically, in my opinion, finishes in the top 4 in the Coastal or not. And I believe the record will be 8-4 this year.
I have them the total opposite of that almost. I have them at 5-7 with wins at East Carolina, West Carolina, Ball State, Wake Forest, and Louisville. So they pretty much beat the teams they're supposed to beat. Everyone else on the schedule, they lose to. I think they've lost too much talent the last 2 years, and I think people may not think Ryan Finley's a good quarterback. He's an NFL quarterback. When you lose an NFL quarterback at a school like North Carolina State, where you can't get a big-time talent at quarterback year after year, it's going to take a toll on you, and I just feel like it's a step back. They could go 6-6. They could make a bowl game, but I have them at 5-7.
And I'd like to go back. I actually forgot to say a few things. So I like to go back and actually talk about the NC State schedule, the complete 12-game schedule. And the first game they play is against East Carolina, and that's at NC State, so that should be a win. And the second week they get Western Carolina at NC State also, so there's the win. And then, like I was saying, the big non-conference game is at West Virginia, which will be a challenging game, but I actually believe NC State will pull through. And then they get Ball State the next week, which I think is a win. So I think NC State's going to come out with a 4-0 start and, build off that. But unfortunately, the next week, that much improved Florida State team, which I'll be talking about later in this video, and I think they will end up losing that game. And then the following week, they get Syracuse at home, which I believe will be another loss. After that, they go to Boston College, and then they play Wake Forest also. I believe they'll win one of those 2 games, so that'll be their 3rd loss. And then after that, they get Clemson, which is unfortunately another loss for them. And then they get Louisville, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, which I believe they'll win the last 3 games and finish, like I said, 8-4. So the next team we're going to talk about is the Louisville Cardinals. And unfortunately for Louisville, again, they're going to suck.
Lamar Jackson's not walking through the door.
Well, they can pray he will, but he's not. So last year they went 2-10 and did not win a game in the ACC. And the ACC, in my opinion, is one of the weaker conferences. And if you can't win a game in the ACC, then it's probably not going to be a good year again. So recruiting-wise, last 5 years they've done very well. They're number 32 in the country recruiting-wise. But they have a lot of young players, and well, actually, I'll take that back. They don't really have that many young players. They actually have a lot of returning players. They didn't really lose anybody production-wise. They're number 24 in the country. And they are going with a new coach this year and everything, so they'll definitely take some time to, bond together and get going. Offense ranked last year, 114th in the country, only 19.8 points per game, which is very bad. And then defense, even worse than that, 121 in the country, gave up 44.1 points per game. You're not going to win too many games when you're giving up that type of points. Returning players, offensive-wise, well, they got a boatload of returning players. I mean, they didn't really lose anybody. So they actually have 2 quarterbacks that are going to compete for the job. I don't even think there's been a quarterback announced yet. The first quarterback is Malik Cunningham. He's more of a runner-type quarterback, so he doesn't stay in the pocket, not a pocket quarterback. Likes to get on his feet, likes to move around, likes to make plays. And then the second quarterback they have is Jawan Pass, and he's more of a pro-style quarterback. Puma Pass, whatever you want to call it. Very good quarterback, both very good quarterbacks. They might actually go with a 2-quarterback system this year. They haven't actually made up their minds on that yet. Running backs, they have Hashan Hall, who is supposed to actually be a very good back for them. And then wide receivers returning, they got Dez Fitzpatrick, Seth Dawkins. And then offensive line-wise, the 2 best offensive linemen is Cole Bentley, which will be their starting center this year. And then offensive tackle will be Mahikai Bagton. Handwriting wasn't that good on that one. And then defensive-wise, returning defensive players, they have Doron Etheridge, which is a linebacker, and then they got C.J. Avery, which is a linebacker. Then they actually have a player that just transferred from Ohio State in 2018, Rajay Boris, which is a corner. And then they have 2 more players, Ross Yeast, which was actually a 4-star recruit when they got him. He hasn't really produced yet, but they're hoping this year will be a breakout year for him. And then Kane Pass, he's actually a strong safety. He's actually the brother of potentially starting quarterback Jawan Pass. What I think this year, what their record will be, I'll give them a game better. I'll say they're gonna go 3-9. But they got a tough schedule. Their big non-conference game, like a lot of ACC teams, is Notre Dame. That'll be week 1, and then week 2 they get Eastern Kentucky at home, which hopefully, for Louisville's sake, that's a win. They're gonna need all the wins they can get. And the following week after that, they get Western Kentucky, which is at home also. And then they get Florida State on the road, and then they come back home to get BC, Boston College, and go on the road again to get Wake Forest. And then the following week, October the 26th, they get Virginia at home. And then they actually have to go to Miami the following week. Then NC State, Syracuse, and Kentucky. So really not much opportunity for wins. I mean, the last game of the season against Kentucky, who knows what that game's going to be. So that'll probably be another loss right there. So not looking good for Louisville.
The only positive I can say is you got yourself a better coach. Scott Satterfield's going to do a good job there. He did a good job at Appalachian State. They won titles in the Sun Belt, and they'll probably compete down the line for ACC titles, but that's not going to happen this year. They're going to be 2-10 again. Have them 0-8 in the ACC, and their only wins are going to be their first 2 games of the year, East and Western Kentucky. You won't beat anyone out of the state of Kentucky this year, because maybe you can beat Kentucky in Kentucky still, but that's the only 3 wins at most you're getting.
Okay, so the next team we're going to talk about is Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Last year they had a decent year. They made a bowl game and actually won the bowl game. They finished the season 7-6. And production-wise, they had the 61st production coming back, and really, in my opinion, they have a decent team. Offensive-wise, last year they finished 27th in the country with 32.8 points per game. Defensive-wise, 112th, which unfortunately defense is still going to struggle, giving up 33.3 points per game. They actually have a lot of key players returning this year, and they're going to have a very good, probably the best QB battle in the entire ACC. Their first quarterback, his name is Sam Hartman. He actually played the first 9 games of the season and was a very, very good quarterback, and then ended up getting injured. And to replace him, his name was Jamie Newman, and he actually came in and won the last 3 out of the last 4 games for Wake Forest and really got them on a good run. So right now it's going to be a really good QB battle for Wake Forest and something you definitely want to keep your eye on. Running back-wise, their main running back, his name is Cade Kanyon, I believe is how you pronounce his name, running back. And then they actually have a whole bunch of wide receivers coming back. Basically, the 3 main wide receivers will be back this year for them. And their names are Scotty Washington, Sage Surratt, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. And then their slot receiver is Kendall Hinton. And then tackle, they have actually 2 tackles coming back, Justin Heron and then Jake Benzinger. And then tight ends, they actually have very good tight end. Unfortunately, their tight end that they lost was one of the better tight ends in the ACC. And defensive-wise, they have quite a bit of defensive players coming back also. And a lot of them have very hard names to pronounce, which is unfortunate for you guys. But the main guy is their leading tackler, which is back. His name is Justin Stratnid, which is a linebacker for Wake Forest. And then their cornerback, which is one of the best in the ACC last year, Insing Bassi, I believe is how you would pronounce his name. He's also back at cornerback. So those are the 2 main players on defense. And they have about 6 guys returning, but those are the 2 main important pieces for this team. Schedule-wise, they really don't have much on the non-conference schedule, but their first game is actually against Utah State, which, if you guys remember, Utah State is coming off a great season last year. They won 11 games, and they took Michigan State to the wire their first game last year.
They do lose their coach though in Matt Wells.
Yeah, they are losing a coach, but that'll be an interesting game. And in my opinion, right now, I really don't know where to go in that game. That's a toss-up in my opinion. I think Wake Forest will pull through by 1 possession, but it'll definitely be a close game. So that's the first game of the season. Then after that, they travel to Rice. And then they get North Carolina at home, which they should be another win for them. And then they get, how do you say that team? Elon. They get Elon week 4. And then after that, they go to BC, Boston College. And then after the Boston College game, they get Louisville at home, Florida State at home, NC State at home, Virginia Tech on the road, Clemson on the road, Duke at home, and then to finish up the season, they go to Syracuse. I believe they'll finish the season at 6-6, and just like basically last year, get themselves into a bowl game.
I am at 3-9. We just think differently on this. He did a lot more research on this team than I did, though. But I have them beating Rice, Elon, and Louisville. I think they could beat Utah State since Matt Wells isn't there anymore, and Utah State did lose quite a bit of production, but they still have their quarterback in Jordan Love, and he's a very good player. So I expect Utah State to go on the road and beat Wake Forest. I mean, they beat Michigan State last year, and I think Michigan State might be a better team last year than this year's Wake Forest team.
Okay, so the next team we're going to talk about is Boston College. Last year they finished the season at 7-5 in the regular season. Production-wise, they had the 110th production coming back to the team, and over the last 5 years, their recruiting's been 6-8 in the country, which is solid. It's not great, but it's solid. And then, well, they have actually a lot of key losses. They lost 4 of the starters on the offensive line, and then they lost all ACC tight end Tommy Sweden. And coming back for offense, they got Ben Petrolia, which is the left tackle, Alec Lindstrom, which is their center, AJ Dillon, which is Heisman hopeful this year. He was actually Heisman hopeful last year, running back, very good player. He'll be a junior this year, so very positive player to build around as long as they can get their offensive line to click. And then quarterback, they have Antonio Brown. And then wide receiver, they got Kobe White. And then he's the main wide receiver coming back. And then they actually have 2 tight ends, but in my opinion, the better one of the 2 is Hunter Long, which will be one of the starting tight ends. Defensive-wise, they really only have 3 players that mean any significant to the team coming back. As I said, the defense was all right last year, but they're going to be probably shaky this year because they lost quite a bit on that side also. Their defensive lineman that's coming back is Tana Karafia, I believe. I don't know. It's a hard name to pronounce. And then corner is Tate Haynes. And then they have a nose guard coming back, or not nose guard, excuse me, a nose tackle coming back, Brandon Sebastian. Offensive-wise last year, they finished 84th in the country with 32 points per game. Defensive-wise, they came in 65 with 25.7 points per game given up. They also lost quite a bit on defense, like I said, so I'm going to say a couple players that they lost. They lost Zach Allen, which is their defensive end, Wyatt Ray, which is also on the defensive end. And then they lost a player that actually had 7 interceptions last year, which was tied for the NCAA lead last year, in Hamp Chevers. And he's actually one of the main players. So the secondary could be very shaky for Wake Forest this year. Boston College this year. So Boston College, I believe their record will be just like last year. I believe they'll finish 7-5. They have a somewhat difficult conference schedule, but non-conference wise, it's basically a bunch of cupcakes. So they start the season with Virginia Tech, which is of course an ACC team. That game's at BC.
It's very weird to start your season with the conference opponent too.
Yeah, definitely. And then they go and they stay at home actually for the next 3 games. So they get Richmond after that. They get Kansas, which comes in, even though Kansas is a Big 12 team, might as well be a non-Power 5. I mean, Kansas is Kansas. What can you say? And then after that, they go to Rutgers. And then they go back home and they get Wake Forest, which I believe Wake Forest will be not a very good team, but a decent team, like I said, 6-6. And then they go on the road and they get Louisville, and then NC State comes into town, and then they have a doozy in the next 2 games. They go to Clemson, and then right after that they go to Syracuse. So that's going to be a tough 2-game stretch, and really a tough 4-game stretch. I mean, they get Florida State after that, which will be at home, thank goodness, and then they have to go to the road and play Notre Dame. And then they end the season with Pitt. So a very difficult schedule, but a schedule I believe they can still find a way to go 7-5 and get to a decent bowl game.
Yeah, I have them at 6-6, so making a bowl game. I trust Steve Adazio, the head coach. They always seem to be better than what's on the roster, no matter what. I think he's worth 1 or 2 wins. I think Duke is the same way in the ACC. I think their coach is worth 1 to 2 wins. I think they're both 2 well-coached teams. So I have Boston College at 6-6, winning against Richmond, Kansas, Rutgers, Wake Forest, NC State, and Louisville.
Okay, so the next team we're going to talk about is probably the most interesting team this year in the ACC, in my opinion, and that would be the powerhouse. Well, once powerhouse Florida State Seminoles. I mean, what can you say? Last year they didn't make a bowl game. They went 5-7, but I believe this year they'll have a resurgent year and definitely get back to being what they used to be in terms of being one of the better teams in the ACC and also one of the better teams in the country. So last year they went 5-7, like I said. Recruiting wise, they've had the number 3 recruiting for the last 5 years, and they continue to recruit well. They have a very talented roster, very, very talented roster coming back. Unfortunately, on offense last year, they finished 111th in the country with only 21.9 points per game. And you're kind of like, wow, how can a team with that much talent finish that bad offensively? And then defensive-wise, a little bit better. They were 76th in the country with giving up 31.5 points per game. Really, I mean, on the offensive side, they don't really have any big key losses. I mean, the players that they have coming back, some of them had decent seasons. Some of them actually weren't even that good. So you can kind of say, well, the players that are coming back really isn't a good thing for Florida State. Defensive-wise, the main guy they lost is actually a very talented player. Got drafted into the NFL, Brian Burns. He's a defensive lineman. And so returning players, they have a boatload of returning players, but these are basically the main ones that they have. And they also have a little bit of a QB battle going on at FSU. The quarterback, they have James Blackman, which we all know. He came in when Francois was suspended and hurt and all that crap. So he looks like he'll probably be the starting quarterback this year. But they also have a transfer quarterback, a guy that really didn't do much at Wisconsin. He's a decent quarterback, southpaw, so you don't know what you're going to get out of him.
The thing is, though, Wisconsin has a much better offensive line than Florida State's had the past couple years, and Hornibrook just got worse there. I don't expect him to win the job. If they need someone that can scramble, and what I've seen from Blackman, he can at least do that. Hornibrook's like a statue back there, and he wasn't very good at Wisconsin anyways.
Yeah, as an Ohio State fan, I miss Alex Hornibrook being at Wisconsin, I will say that. But yeah, he probably won't win the starting job. He'll definitely be the backup, but Florida State has a terrible offensive line, so there's a good chance James Blackman, I mean, he's a skinny guy, so there's a good chance he could get injured, so Hornibrook could see some time at QB this year.
I thought DeAndre Francois was a good quarterback, but behind that offensive line, I don't think many quarterbacks can be very good. Their offensive line has been terrible the last 3 years.
And then another key player coming back is actually a wide receiver. In my opinion, one of the best wide receivers people don't know about in the country. His name is Tamoris Terry. He actually averaged 21.3 yards per catch last year. And I believe he only had 35 receptions, but 8 of his 35 receptions were touchdowns. So the man is a very impressive player. He's only a sophomore, so he definitely has time to blossom and come into one of the best wide receivers in the ACC.
Like he said, Florida State's issue is not talent. They have the talent of probably even a Clemson at this point. I think Clemson will have better talent after next year, but Florida State has enough talent to compete for national championships. The question is going to be Willie Taggart and see if he's a championship-level head coach, and that remains to be seen at this point.
And then continuing off the talent, I mean, they got a great running back in Cam Akers. And unfortunately for Cam Akers, his numbers weren't as good as they could have been just because, like the issue with Florida State's the offensive line. I mean, he had no way to run. Basically, every time he got the ball, he was, tackled at the line of scrimmage. So he's returning. He'll actually be a junior this year, so they're expecting great things from them as long as the offensive line can get better from last year, basically. And then defensive-wise, they actually have quite a bit return on defense, too. And one of the main players is defensive tackle. His name is Marvin Wilson. He's supposed to have a very nice year this year. And then they have outside linebacker, which he actually moved from safety last year. He was actually a strong safety, and they moved him from strong safety to outside linebacker. And then another player they actually have coming back, he's a cornerback, and his name is Stanford Samuels III. And then they actually have another Samuel as another cornerback, and both of these players, well, actually the first one that I said is a junior, and this one's a sophomore. And he will be playing quarterback also. Schedule-wise, Florida State, actually start out first game, which is always kind of hard when you have to start out with a team like Boise State, because Boise State can give a lot of powerhouses trouble, so that'll be a difficult first game.
I think you'll know right away that Florida State if they're good or not, because Boise State is probably an 8-4, 9-3 team this year. Like you said, they always give Power 5 teams trouble. And there's a couple teams you can look at this year where after the first game, I think you're going to be able to tell how good they are, and Florida State's one of those. If Willie Taggart comes out and they lose this game at home to Boise State by more than a touchdown, even if they lose in general, he better hope they win at least 8 games this year, otherwise he could be out the door.
It's a primetime game, so that's 7 o'clock on ESPN, so, a lot of the lights will be on Florida State. This is a chance for Willie Taggart to show that Florida State's ready to take on this year and actually make a lot of improvement this year. So that'll be a big first game. And then the second game of the season should be an easy win. Louisiana Monroe, that's at home. And then week 3 they go to Virginia, which could be kind of a difficult game. Well, actually, it will be a difficult game, I should say. And then week 4 they go back home and they get Louisville, which should be an easy victory. And then after that they get NC State at home. And then, after getting NC State, they actually have to travel to Clemson and then travel to Wake Forest. So that could be a difficult 3-game stretch. And then get Syracuse at home, Miami at home, BC on the road, Alabama State, and then, of course, they always end the season with their rival, the Florida Gators, and that'll be at Florida this year. So I'm projecting them to actually win 3 more games than they did last year and make a bowl game this year. I'm going to say they're going to go 8-4, which I'm kind of thinking 9-3, but I'm going to go 8-4 just because it's a difficult schedule when you got Florida on the road in non-conference, and you also got Boise State at home. So I'll say 8-4 for Florida State.
I'm falling in the trap. I'm going 9-3. If they lose to Boise, though, all bets are off. They could go 6-6, and Willie Tack could be walking out that door because they had a 36-year bowl streak, and he ruined that last year. If they don't make a bowl game this year, or even I think he has to win at least 8 games, he's gone, in my opinion. I don't think they're going to tolerate that because this is a top 10 program of the last 20 years. There's in probably top 5, maybe even top 3. They were that dominant at one point. And now we know why Jimbo Fisher left.
Okay, so the last team I'm going to talk about is the team I'm most excited for to watch this year because I think Syracuse is on the up and up, and I'm ready to see them have a really big year. I mean, they had a big year last year. They went 10-3, but they did lose their star quarterback, Eric Dungy. So we'll see what happens there. But offensively, last year they're number 17 in the country. They averaged 40.2 points per game. Defensive-wise, they did struggle defensively, only 87th in the country, giving up 27.8 points a game. Like I said, key losses, of course, the quarterback Eric Dungy, which was one of the best quarterbacks in the NCAA last year. Very good, very mobile quarterback. And then they lost a little bit on the tackle. They lost a couple tackles, unfortunately. They lost Cody Conway, which was a tackle, and then another guy's name was Cody also, Cody Martin, which was a tackle, and then lost left guard Aaron Roberts. Defensively, they lost 3 main guys, basically. Chris Slayton, which was a nose tackle. Ryan Guthrie, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He was a linebacker. And then they lost another linebacker, which I believe if you say his name, Keeland Whitner is how you would pronounce his name. And they have quite a bit of returning. They got quite a bit on the offensive side and the defensive side. And I'm very excited to see the new quarterback. His name is Tommy DeVito. And he's supposed to be a very good quarterback. Not as good as Eric Dungy, of course, but not many quarterbacks are as good as Eric Dungy. But he's more of a pocket passer, so we'll see how that works because Eric Dungy, he made a lot of plays with his feet. So Tommy will definitely be staying in the pocket and it'll be more of a pro-style offense. So Syracuse offensive line is really going to have to be up for the task this year. Running backs, they actually have quite a bit of good running backs. They got Mo Neal, which will most likely be their starting running back. He's a senior this year. And then they actually have a transfer running back from Oklahoma, Abdul Adams. He's actually supposed to be a very good player. He never really got a chance at Oklahoma, but he'll definitely be getting chances as a backup and probably third down back here with Syracuse. They have guard coming back. His name's Dakota Davis. And then they have good slot receivers with Sean Riley and then Nakeem Johnson. He's supposed to be a very talented player also. And then they actually have an up-and-coming player. He got a little playing time last year. He'll be a sophomore this year, and his name is Tay Harris, and he's also a wide receiver. Defensively, their defense, like I said, was only 87th in the country, so they could definitely use some improvement defensively. But they do have quite a bit of guys returning, so that'll help. They have a defense end named Alton Robertson. He's coming back this year. They have Kendall Coleman, another defense end, which is supposed to be a very talented player. Nose tackle is Josh Black. Cornerback, they have Chris Frederick. And then both of these cornerbacks, and then strong safety, Evan Foster, both of those are returning seniors, so that's very good to have that leadership on the defensive side. And then they have a very, very, very talented free safety. His name is Andre Cisco, and he earned All-American honors, and also he was the ACC Defensive Player, Rookie Defensive Player of the Year, so very key player for them. And then they have 2 linebackers coming back, and Andrew Armstrong, and then Jackie Williams is also the other linebacker that's coming back for Syracuse. Recruiting, they are number 56 for the last 5 years, so not too bad recruiting wise.
And the reason we're saying this is because the last three national champions, which have been Alabama and Clemson, have been top 10 average in the recruitings over a 4-year stretch. So you have to have good recruiting classes to compete for national championships. If you don't, you can be good, but you'll never be a national champion.
Yeah, going off that, like he said, I mean, they don't have an amazing recruiting class, but North 56, I mean, they went 10-3 last year, so that shows even with an okay recruiting class, you can still have a very productive season. And so I'm going to now talk about what their schedule is this year and what record I believe they'll end up with. So the main non-conference game will be at Maryland, which is week 2. And the first game of the season is at Liberty, so that should be a win. Liberty's a decent team, actually, though, so that could be a little bit of a struggle, but I believe Syracuse, it'll be a tight game, and Syracuse will pull away in the fourth quarter. And then week 3 is the big one. They got Clemson coming into town, and like I said earlier with Clemson, every time Syracuse plays Clemson, I mean, they bring the A game. They look like they're ready to play anybody in the country. When Clemson comes into town, they look like they can beat anybody in the country. So that'll be a big game. That's a primetime game, 7:30 ABC. So the Carrier Dome will be rocking. And this is a game that I think if Syracuse can win, could really boost this team. I mean, you're looking at probably the Orange Bowl if they can get this win. So that'll be a big game for them, the biggest game of the schedule in my opinion. And then after that, they get a couple cupcakes. They get Western Michigan from the MAC, and then they get Holy Cross the week after that. And then they go on the road. They actually got a pretty tough game against NC State on the road. That's actually also a primetime game, 8 o'clock ESPN. And then the week after that, they get Pittsburgh at home. And then they go on the road and get Florida State. And then they get BC at home, Duke on the road, Louisville on the road, and then they end the season against Wake Forest. I believe Syracuse will go 9-3, but if they can get that win against Clemson, I mean, that can change the entire season. If they can get that win against Clemson, I'm saying 11-1, but right now 9-3.
I have them at 9-3 also with wins at Liberty, Western Michigan, Holy Cross, Pitt, Boston College, Duke, Louisville, North Carolina State, and Wake Forest. They could go 10-2 though. I have them losing to Maryland on the road. Only because I'm high on Maryland this year. I think Mike Locksley can do a good job in Maryland. And Maryland, surprisingly, has a lot more talent than you would think. They did just lose their starting wide receiver, Jashawn Jones, this year. But I think they can be a good team. But Syracuse could beat them on the road. And if they do, they could end up going 10-2, which would be another good year. And Dino Babers, their coach, is very capable of that. He's a very good coach coming over from Bowling Green the past couple of years. He's done a good job recruiting. He's done a good job developing the players. My only thing with this team is when we saw Dungy go out last year versus Notre Dame rolled him after that. It wasn't close. And if DeVito isn't, you don't have to be as good as Dungy because I expect the defense to be a little bit better than last year. But if you're not close to what he was, they could also go 7-5. You never know. But I have them at 9-3.
And then that's it on the coastal side of the ACC.
You mean Atlantic?
I think I've said Coastal a couple times, haven't I?
I'll have to check it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have. You might want to change that. I don't know why I keep saying Coastal.
Okay, I'm going to start with the Pittsburgh Panthers, the ACC Coastal, the champs last year of that division, which the division last year was a joke because they went 7-7 last year. They only won one game out of conference the whole year. They went 6-2 in the ACC. They have to replace two really good running backs in Quadre Olison and Darren Hall, both starters. Quadre Olison rushed for 1,000 yards. Darren Hall was close to 1,000 yards, so almost two 1,000-yard backs. They also lose 3 out of their 5 offensive linemen. They lose defensive tackle Shane Roy and another starter along the defensive end and Dwayne Hendricks. They lose 3 out of their 5 starting linebackers. The other 2 was a starting linebacker. And then the other one split time, actually. So they're both back. Key players returning, quarterback Kenny Pickett. And Kenny Pickett wasn't that good last year. Only had 1,900 yards passing. So if they're going to have to rely on him to pass the ball, this team is not going to be very good. Like I said, they lost 2 very good running backs. One 1,000-yard back, one that was very close in Darren Hall. They also have wide receiver returning, leading wide receiver Maurice French. He only caught 500 yards of passes, though. So, I mean, that's nothing in this day and age of college football. So, they're either going to have to be much better at passing, which is going to be hard losing 3 out of your 5 starting offensive linemen from last year, or you're going to have to reload at running back. And with the their recruiting ranking, which is 43rd over the last 4 years and 58th last year. I don't see a running back coming through that door replacing Quadre Olson and Darren Hall. They rank number 54th in the country in returning production, which I like that stat better than returning starters, because if one guy plays 51%, one guy plays 49%, the other guy's a starter, but you may have gotten more production out of the guy that played 49% in his playing time. So I like that stat better. They ranked 94th in offense at 25.6 points per game and 75th in defense with 27.8 points per game. That's out of 130 teams. So 94th on offense and 75th on defense. I have them going 3-9, I believe. Actually, I have them going 4-8. I have them with wins at Ohio, Delaware, North Carolina, and Boston College. Their whole schedule is they start out with Virginia, so another ACC team starting against a rival in their conference. And they play Ohio at Penn State. They play UCF out of conference, and I think UCF will beat them, even though it is at home. Then they play Delaware at home. They have to go on the road at Duke, at Syracuse. Then they get Miami at home. Then they go to Georgia Tech. They're in North Carolina, or at home versus North Carolina. They're at Virginia Tech. And then to finish out the season, they play Boston College at home. And I have them 4-8 with wins, like I said, against Ohio, Delaware, UNC, and BC.
I actually have Pitt doing a little bit better. Well, one game better to be exact. I have them going 5-7 this year. And kind of going off what he said, I mean, they really don't have many games besides Ohio, Delaware, and teams like that where they're going to get many wins. The game at Penn State, and Penn State, which won't be as good as they've been the last couple of years, especially with losing quite a bit of players. So I believe they'll still lose that game, though, to Penn State.
If that game was in Pitt, I think they'd have a chance because Penn State did lose a lot.
Yeah.
Same with UCF. That game's at home, but UCF, it depends on the quarterback situation. And UCF, I haven't checked this, but I'm pretty sure they've recruited better than Pittsburgh over the last 2 or 3 years at least. If they had Mackenzie Milton, it wouldn't even be close. It'd be a blowout.
And then they also had 2 tough games on the road at Syracuse and at Virginia Tech, which both those games would basically be sure losses. So not really many opportunities for Pitt to pick up quality wins this year, but at 5-7, hopefully, who knows, maybe they can get over the hump and get that 6th win, make a bowl game. But right now, I don't think they will.
Next team I have is Georgia Tech. They went 7-6 last year. They're replacing Paul Johnson, their head coach, with Jeff Collins from Temple. I think that was a good pickup. Time to get in the 21st century of offense, not use the triple option, especially in a very good recruiting place like Georgia, which may be the 4th best state right now in the country recruiting-wise. But they lose a lot of people. They lose their best offensive lineman, Parker Braun, transferred to Texas. Right now, he's not going to start there because the scheme is totally different. But they also lose 7 defensive starters and 7 of the 11 top tacklers on their team. So that's going to be really hard to replace. They ranked 79th on defense anyway, so you're losing a lot of people off a bad defense. I don't expect them, unless you bring in a lot of talent, which you didn't last year. They were 51st in the country in recruiting, and they were 53rd over the last 4 years. 79th on defense with 29.3 points per game. So I don't expect them to get much better if they lost 7 of their 11 top tacklers. Their offense was 33rd in the country with 33.6 points per game. They return starting quarterback Tobias Oliver. He only threw 16 passes the whole year last year. Think about that, 16 the whole year. Trevor Lawrence will throw 16 in a quarter this year. I would bet on that. 2 returning linemen and Kenny Cooper and Zach Quinney. They lose the other 3. They also had to go on the transfer market for a tight end because they didn't have one. In Paul Johnson's offense, you never use tight end. And Jeff Collins, you have to have a tight end. It's the offense he likes to run. He likes to use his tight end a lot. They got him, and guess where they got him from? Probably the worst college football team there is out of the Power 5, or not even the Power 5, just in general. UConn. UConn's terrible, and they got Tyler Davis, a tight end from there. Their best 2 players are probably transfers, though, and Antonius Clay from Florida. He's a defensive lineman. And Michigan Wolverine, Miles Sims, they both transfer there. They'll both probably start. They'll probably be their best 2 players on the defensive side. And that's what you got to do when you go to a place like this. If you were bad on defense, you already lost a bunch of people. You got to go find people on the transfer market that can help you because you're not recruiting at a high level and you're already struggling with the players you have there. You got to go out on the transfer market. I have them going 2-10 this year with their only wins at the Citadel and North Carolina State.
Basically, just like Pitt, I actually have Georgia Tech going one game better than what Matt does. I have them going 3-9, and I have them beating what he said, the Citadel, which is week 2, and then I also have them winning games against. What did I had them winning games against, I believe, Pitt, like you said, also, and then I thought maybe they could pull one off, so I thought I'd give them the benefit of the doubt against Duke, also on the road, so that'd be the 3 wins.
And they open up at Clemson, so that's going to be a bloodbath. They play USF. They got a chance to beat USF. I don't really know about USF this year. This is probably Charlie Strong's last year at USF if he doesn't produce. They play the Citadel, then they have a bye week, then they play at Temple, so Jeff Collins will get his head beaten in by his old team. They play North Carolina at home, Duke on the road, Miami on the road. That's 2 pretty hard games back-to-back for them on the road, especially with the talent level they have compared to those 2 teams. Then they have a week off, then they go play Pitt at home, Virginia on the road. It seems like all their hard games are on the road too, which isn't good because you're not good in the first place, then you have to go on the road to these places. They get Virginia Tech at home, they get North Carolina State at home, and they get Georgia at home. That last game of the season is not going to be fun for them.
I'll tell you what, the scheduling people did not do them any
favors. Yeah.
Start out with Clemson, then you end the season with Georgia. I mean, that's about as bad as it gets.
Pretty much every game you have that's hard is on the road other than Virginia Tech. Next up, I have Virginia. Virginia last year was 8-5. They were number 20 or 72nd in the country on offense with 28 points per game, and defense they were number 21st. They are very good defense at 20.1 points per game. They're returning or key losses. Running back Jordan Ellis, he was a 1,000-yard rusher last year, so that's anytime you have a 1,000-yard back, that's going to hurt, especially with a team like Virginia where you haven't recruited. They were very well. They were 55th last year. 55th over a 4-year span, and 39th last year, which is actually the best recruiting class Bronco Mendenhall's had. And Bronco Mendenhall's a very good coach. He came from BYU, and I think he'll get it turned around. Jawan Thornhill, too, is their leading tackler and safety. He was an NFL player. I believe he plays on the Chiefs. I think he was a 3rd-round draft pick. He's a very good player. They also lose their leading sack artist, and Chris Pierce with 6.5 sacks. Key returners, Bryce Perkins. I think he's the 2nd-best quarterback in the ACC behind Trevor Lawrence. I think he's a very good quarterback. I was surprised watching him last year. And Virginia as a team, I thought they were a pretty good team, and I think they're only going to get better this year. They also returned wide receiver Joe Reed, who's a do-it-all type of player. He returns kicks and punts for them. He's very speedy, good player. And then their leading tackler and Jordan Mack is also back. They also have the highest-rated recruit Virginia's ever had in Jawan Briggs. He's actually from Ohio, where we're at right now. And 15 of the 22 starters returned, which is a lot of production returning. They actually ranked 55th in the country in returning production, so that's pretty good. And I have them going 10-2 with wins at Pitt, William Mary, FSU, Old Dominion, Duke, Louisville, UNC, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, and Liberty.
I have them actually going 9-3, so 1 game worse than what he has. And I have them losing at Notre Dame, and then I have them losing the following week at Miami. And then I actually believe they will not win their rival game. Even though it's at Virginia, it's a home game, I believe they'll also lose to Virginia Tech, making them a 9-3 team.
They could easily lose to Virginia Tech. They haven't beaten Virginia Tech in, I believe, 5 to 6 years, maybe may even be longer than that, but it's been a while. They should have beat them last year. They kind of choked that game away. They could also lose to Florida State. If Florida State does turn out to be as good or better than we're thinking, they could lose them because Florida State's got a lot more talent than Virginia, a lot more talent than pretty much everyone else in the country. The next team I have is the Miami Hurricanes. Miami went 7-6 last year. They ranked number 66 in the country on offense with 28.8 points per game. Their defense was very good with 19.5 points per game, which was 18th in the country. They return their key losses actually were running back Travis Homer, who's now in the NFL. He was a very good running back, left after his junior year. They lose their, co-starting cornerback Malik Rozier. That's not a big loss, though. He wasn't very good. And Nkosi Perry, the quarterback that was with them last year, wasn't very good either. So maybe they can get an upgrading quarterback this year with Jaron Williams coming in to start. Surprisingly, Tate Martell didn't get the job, and neither did N'Kosi Perry, even though N'Kosi Perry's been there longer than Jaron Williams. And Tate Martell, everyone thought was going to start from transferring from Ohio State. You figured he'd come in and start right away. They also lose their starting strong safety, with Jaquan Johnson, and their leading tackler, with Jaquan Johnson. They lose Joe Jackson, who led them in sacks, and Gerald Willis, tackles for loss. All of those guys went to the NFL, either as undrafted or late-round draft picks. And their defensive line, it took a lot of beating with those type of players leaving. I mean, you're losing your guy that led you in sacks and tackles for loss, and they're both very good players on a defense that was 18th in the country. So you're losing something from what was the best unit on your team. But Manny Diaz there now will probably be able to get more out of what they have there than most coaches, because he is a very good defensive coach. They also lose 3 out of their 5 starting offensive linemen. But they do have some good key returning players, and of course they were 27th in the country in recruiting last year, and over the last 4 years they recruited at a high level. They're Miami. They're always going to recruit at a decently high level. They were 17th in the country the last 4 years, combined is what their average was. Key returning players, DJ Dallas, running back, and they're going to need him to step up. He was very good last year in the time he got. He actually averaged almost about the same yards per carry as Travis Homer. Travis Homer averaged 6 yards per carry. DJ Dallas was at 5.7, so you're getting about the same production. Wide receiver Jeff Thomas, he's going to have to get better hands. He dropped a lot of passes last year, but he's a very talented wide receiver, and their leading wide receiver. They're going to need him to step up. And then at linebacker, I think this might be the most talented linebacking core in this side of the ACC. Shaq Quarterman and Mike Pickney, they both could have gone pro, probably been late-round draft picks. Instead, they decided to stay. They're both very good players. They were second and third in tackling, so they need to get them to step up this year. This year I have Miami going 9-3 with wins at UNC, Bethune-Cookman, Central Michigan, Virginia, Georgia Tech, Pitt, Louisville, FIU, and Duke.
I actually had Miami going 8-4, but I'm actually going to change that. I'm going to go 9-3 also. I took a look at the schedule again, and I believe they actually have a pretty easy schedule. Besides the first game's at Florida, which I believe they'll take the L in that game.
It's at Miami. Actually, it's in Orlando. I think that's a neutral site game. It's in Orlando, Florida, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a neutral site game. Either way, I think Florida will win that game. So that's their first loss I believe they'll have. And then I think they'll also lose at Florida State, which everyone knows Miami, Florida State, huge rivalry. And if Florida State is as good as I think they will be this year, I think Florida State will take that victory. And then the third and final loss that I have them losing is probably Virginia. I was either thinking Virginia Tech or Virginia. I knew one of those two games. They played them back-to-back weeks. I believe they'll lose one of those two, but I think they'll lose the Virginia game. So Miami goes 9-3 this year.
I'm with him. I think they can be better than I have them at 9-3, but they're going to lose one of the Virginia games. They're not winning both those. I just don't see it. They're a young team, and usually young teams don't play at a high level back-to-back weeks against very good opponents. It just doesn't happen unless you're Alabama. And even then, they have very good older players at key positions. And it's going to come down to the quarterback. Is Jaron Williams really that good? And let me tell you, if he's not that good and they start just throwing people at the board hoping they stick, like if they throw Tate Martell out there in the middle of the Florida game, this team could go 7-5 because they have talent, but it's Manny Diaz's first year as a coach, so you want to make it as easy as possible on him. And hopefully Jaron Williams sticks and plays pretty well. And let's say Jaron Williams, it's the opposite. Jaron Williams plays very well. They could beat Florida because Florida's had a lot of losses, not just to the draft, but a lot of people being kicked off their team and a lot of incoming recruits not making the team or not becoming eligible because of the academic standards. So they could beat them, but I have them at 9-3, like I said.
And then Miami, just kind of like Florida State. They remind me of Florida State, very talented team, a team that's trying to get over the hump this year. So it'll be interesting to see those two teams because I think if those two teams have great years, they can definitely challenge for an ACC title this year.
Okay, next is Virginia Tech. They went 6-7 last year. It was a very disappointing year. I thought this team had a lot of talent for the year. I thought they could have made the ACC championship game. They lose a lot of people. They lose running back Stephen Peoples, their leading running back. They lose their leading wide receiver in Eric Kuma. They also lose defensive tackle Ricky Walker. He led them in tackles for loss and lose 3 out of the 5 starting linemen that they had last year. They also had a pretty good recruiting class, and over the 4 years they've had a pretty good recruiting class. They have the number 30th in average over the last 4 years and 26th last year, so pretty good recruiting wise. Key returning players, of course, Ryan Willis, their quarterback. He was very good after Josh Jackson got hurt last year. And watching Josh Jackson as a freshman, I thought he was going to be a very good player for Virginia Tech. But then, the injury happened. I think a couple other things went down there where he just didn't fit in, and now he's in Maryland. They bring back Damon Hazelton Jr., their leading wide receiver. He's a very good wide receiver, had over 1,000 yards last year. They also bring back their leading tackler, Rayshard Ashby. And they bring back their safety, Reggie Floyd, who was their second leading tackler. They ranked 61st on offense with 29.8 points per game, and they ranked 85th on defense with 31 points per game. I think they're going to be much better this year. I think they underproduced a lot last year, and I actually have them going and competing for this side of the division at 10-2 with wins at Boston College, Old Dominion, Furman, Duke, Miami, Rhode Island, UNC, Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, and Pitt.
Unfortunately for Virginia Tech, they got to play Old Dominion again this year, which I guarantee they don't want to lose to them again. Last year was an embarrassment. They lost to Old Dominion 49-35 on the road, so they definitely don't want to repeat that. And I actually have Virginia Tech going 9-3 this year. I believe they actually lose that first game at BC. I think that's going to be a very challenging game to start the season to go on the road against a very good BC team. And then I have them losing at Miami, and then I have them losing to Notre Dame. So I believe they'll go 9-3 this year. And believe it or not, they'll beat Old Dominion. So should be a good year.
Yeah, they could go worse than that. I could see 8-4 if they lose to Miami and Boston College. I just don't see Boston College being as good as them this year. And I just have a feeling Ryan Willis is going to kind of be the top performer. I could see him stepping out and taking that second spot because no one's taking the first spot from Trevor Lawrence as the best quarterback in this conference. But he could take over for Bryce Perkins and pretty much ascend to the second best, which if he becomes the second best quarterback, they have a good, pretty good team overall. So I think they could be 10-2, and that's what I have them as. The next team I have is Duke. They were 8-5 last year, and they lost a lot. They're losing a lot. Daniel Jones, people may not have thought he was worth the 6th overall pick. I didn't think he was that. I thought he'd be a late first-round pick. But he's, like I said before with Ryan Finley and NC State, he's an NFL quarterback, and you may not like it, but when you lose a good NFL quarterback at a school like this, it's hard to replace. It may take them 10 to 20 years to find the next Daniel Jones. They also lose their 2 leading wide receivers are both gone as well. T.J. Rahming is gone. Jonathan Lloyd is gone. They lose their leading tackler and linebacker, Giles Harris. They lose 2 out of the 5 offensive linemen, including the left tackle and center, which are probably the 2 most important offensive line positions you have on the O-line. Their key returning, I only have one guy down for them. I have Deion Jackson, their starting running back. Everyone else is young and inexperienced. Like I said, when you lose your 2 best wide receivers, you're going to have someone step up. And in a place like Duke, it's hard to find guys that are talented that want to go to Duke, not just because it's Duke football, but it's because of the academics. It's hard to get into. They were 64th in the country on offense last year with 29.4 points per game and 27.4 defensive points allowed per game, which ranks 72nd in the country. They have the 48th best class over the last 4 years. That's their average, and 49th in 2009, so staying pretty close to that average. They also return 100. They're 106th in returning production out of 130 teams, so that's very low. And speaking about that, Virginia Tech, to go back, was the 11th in returning production. So they return a lot. That's another reason I have them going 10-2. But Duke, on the other hand, I do not have a good year for their standards. I think their standards at this point are 6-6, 7-5, 8-4 on a really good year, making bowl games pretty consistently. I have them going 5-7, and I think I was being fairly generous. I could see them going 4-8. I have them beating NCAA, North Carolina, AT&T, Middle Tennessee, Pitt, Georgia Tech, and Wake Forest.
I'm not as generous with you. I'm saying 3-9, and that's, in my opinion, that's pushing it really, because outside of that North Carolina A&T game and the Middle Tennessee game, I'm not seeing many wins.
And they could lose to Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee is not a bad football team.
That game's on the road also. And then just like Georgia Tech, I mean, what a way to start the season. I mean, you got to go play Alabama. I mean, that's going to be a bloodbath. They'll lose that game by 50 at least. And then they end the season against Miami. So those are 2 tough games to start the season and to finish the season. And the third win, because I said they'll beat those 2 non-Power 5 teams. And then probably the third win would be It's hard to say. I'm gonna go and say maybe against Wake Forest, but I
They could
think
lose
they'll
that
lose.
game too.
I think they could lose. I mean, they could lose every game on the schedule. To be honest. Well, no, I'll take that back. I believe they'll beat Georgia Tech at home, so that'll be their third win right there. So I think they will lose to Wake Forest on the road, and then I also believe they'll lose their rival game against North Carolina this year.
I was being generous because David Cutcliffe is a very good coach. He always seems to get more out of his team, a lot like Dino Babers of Syracuse. They seem to get a little bit more out of their team than what's actually there, so that's why I'm going 5-7. But like he said, they'd go 3-9 easily. And then North Carolina, it's the return of the Mac. Mac Brown is back. I'm a Texas fan, so the last couple years of Mac Brown I did not like, but before that he won, I think, 4 or 5 seasons in a row of 10-plus wins, which is very good. And I think this is going to breathe new life into him. I think he got bored at Texas. I think he's going to like going back here. I don't think it's going to be very long, though. I think it's going to be a lot like Les Miles at Kansas. I think he's there to get the brand up a little bit, get the national brand up, recruit very well, and then leave after probably 3 to 4 years when you get in. Right now, he's recruiting at a very high level. I think they're ranked in the top 20 in next year's class. So if you can just keep continuing that and then bring in a young coach that's energetic, you can maybe keep that trend going and win a lot of ball games. But anyways, last year they were 2-9. Key losses, they lose Nathan Elliott, who was their quarterback. He wasn't their quarterback at the beginning of the year. Chaz Surratt was actually their quarterback, and he's moving to linebacker, which is really weird because I watched him and I thought he was a pretty good quarterback, but he got hurt last year and Nathan Elliott became the starter. He's no longer with the team. I don't know exactly what happened there. They also lose linebacker Cole Holcomb, their leading tackler, and Malik Carney, leading sacks. So you lose both. Lose someone that's leading your team in sacks and tackling. It's going to be hard to recover there, especially at a place like North Carolina, especially in the first year with Mac Brown. Our starting quarterback is either going to be freshman Sam Howell or freshman Cade Fortin. Cade Fortin was a very highly ranked coming out of high school. He actually would have been higher ranked if he didn't break his leg his senior year. I believe he was the 29th ranked quarterback coming out, so that's pretty high. And they said it could have been in the teens if he didn't break his leg his senior year. Key returning, they return wide receiver Nathan Ratliff Williams, their leading receiver. Their second leading receiver, Daz Newsome. Both leading running backs, Antonio Williams and Michael Carter, come back. Safety Miles Dorn, he was their fourth leading tackler, or he was their leading tackler, and he had 4 interceptions last year. And all 5 O-linemen returns. So, I mean, I think on offense they're going to be pretty good, especially under the people Mac Brown's brought in. They want to get up-tempo style. And if the quarterback's halfway decent, I mean, you got 5 O-linemen returning and a lot of weapons around you. I think you're going to be pretty good this year. They ranked 78th in the country last year with 27.4 points per game. I expect that to increase. Their D was 107th out of 130 with 34.5 points allowed per game, which is very low. And I don't expect that to get much better because, like I said, they lost a lot on defense, but pretty much the whole offense is coming back, which is good. And I have them going 6-6 this year. And I'll admit, this is favoritism towards Mac Brown. I think he's a good coach. And I think their offense is going to be at least decent if they can get average starting quarterback play out of one of the freshman quarterbacks. I have wins at Wake Forest, App State, Georgia Tech, Duke, Mercer, and North Carolina State.
I'm basically going along the same lines. I have them going 6-6 also. And unlike Matt, could care less about Mac Brown, could care less about Texas. Not a Texas fan, unfortunately, so could care less. But I believe Mac Brown will definitely improve this team. They do start out with a couple tough games against South Carolina at home, and then they get Miami. So I believe they'll start 0-2, but then I think they'll rebound nicely. They'll beat Wake Forest, and they'll beat Appalachian State. And then they'll lose to Clemson, which makes them 2-3. They'll beat Georgia Tech, which gets them 3-3. Lose to Virginia Tech, which will make them 3-4. And then they'll win a game against Duke and I believe they'll beat Pitt and then Mercer, which will give them their 6 wins. And I don't think they'll be NC State in the season, so that's the only difference between Matt and I in terms of North Carolina.
6-6.
Yep, 6-6, but I don't have them beating NC State.
Yeah, I'm very low on NC State this year.
I like NC State, so it is what it is, right?
Okay, that's going to be it for the ACC preview. I hope you liked it. Please subscribe below and
throw out who you think's going to win the ACC championship.
No, there'll be a video coming on that, so you have to stay tuned.
I'll stay tuned.
Like the video
jump the gun.
Like the video and subscribe. Thanks for watching.
Yep, thank you.